The band's visit opened in a small off-Broadway theater last December to much critical acclaim. That limited sold-out engagement was extended twice before it closed just 1 month later. The great news is that now it has returned to Broadway this time and to overwhelming raves. Everyone has called it the best musical on Broadway. So, for this special live broadcast in the Greene Space, we want to give you a taste of what makes it so special, and I'm delighted to welcome David Yazbek, who wrote the music and lyrics, Itamar Moses, who wrote the book, and they are joined by three of its stars, Katrina Lenk, Tony Shalhoub, and Ari'el Stachel. Thank you for coming to our show in the Greene Space. We should point out also that many of the musicians in the show are here, and they'll be accompanying some live music, so we got a lot of exciting stuff in store. And we thank this audience for coming here as well. What makes this being a hit all the more remarkable is that the plot doesn't initially sound like something that would work for a play, much less a Broadway musical. Who wants to tell the basic premise of the story? Itamar?
Sure. It's the band's visit's based on an Israeli movie of the same title from about 10 years ago, and it tells the story of an Egyptian police orchestra that plays classical Arab music that goes to Israel to give a concert. And
they're from Alexandria.
Yeah, they're from Alexandria, and instead of because of a miscommunication at the bus station, instead of going to the sort of central Israeli city that they're supposed to go to give the concert, they end up in a tiny town in the middle of the desert, in the middle of nowhere, and there's no more transportation for the rest of the night, so they have to stay the night. And the story is sort of about all of the little connections and tiny but huge revelations that happen when the Israelis take in these Egyptian musicians for the night.
We also learn about things that have nothing to do with the band, other side stories.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the Israeli characters in the town are all at some sort of, point in their lives. Young people trying to find first love, married people trying to get their marriage to work, older people wondering, if the last interesting thing in their life has happened to them, and this encounter kind of catalyzes all of those things.
David, how did this project come to you?
There was the initial producer, who's still the lead producer, Oren Wolf. This was a passion project for him. He saw the movie at the JCC uptown and immediately knew that he wanted to bring it to the stage. I think he initially wanted to do a straight play or maybe a play with some music. And it just evolved from there. So I got a call from him. Itamar got the same call at a similar point in time, and we all got together.
When you say a play with some music, it's an atypical musical because you're not always using songs to move the plot along, as has become the tradition, I think, since Carousel or Oklahoma?
Yeah, well, there's always a balancing act, and I'm a believer and a fan of songs moving the plot along, but songs can also move things deeper. Songs can work as a meditation. Songs can work as a close-up on a character. We do a lot of that in the show.
You've also done The Full Monty, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown, and you've put out 4 albums of your own music.
Well, 5 albums.
Leonard. 5 now. Okay, sorry. So why have you said that this is one of the first projects outside of solo work where I'm very comfortable and it feels like I'm home?
When I started the project, I wasn't sure what it would feel like to make it. When I usually making a musical feels like it's fun, but it feels often like a group of assignments. Oh, I have to write this song now. This character needs this. This show felt like almost every song feels like a personal expression in the way that when I'm writing songs for an album, when I can do anything I want, I'm writing personal expressions, things I need to say or want to say. This show, these characters contained a lot of that stuff.
I'm throwing this out to our cast members. How familiar were you with the Egyptian Middle Eastern culture that this show is? Well, it's a mix of Egyptian and Israeli cultures, but how familiar were you with that? Tony?
Well, I had been to Israel actually years and years ago. I was working, doing theater, and we were invited to the theater festivals there. So in that sense, I you know, having been there, and it's like nowhere else I ever traveled to. And my background is Lebanese. My father was Lebanese, and so I grew up somewhat in that kind of you know, Middle Eastern culture too. But
Although the Arabic that you would speak would be very different than the Arabic that Egyptians spoke.
Exactly, it's a different dialect, the Arabic that I grew up listening to, but it's close enough that I could kind of make those connections.
And Katrina, you play an Israeli woman.
Yes, but to answer your question before, I was familiar with Egypt in the way that I think most of us in the West are familiar with Egypt, which is like the pyramids, the pharaohs, and as far as like modern.
You've been?
No, I would love to go. Anyone? But as far as like modern Egypt, I was admittedly pretty ignorant, especially of the music and the culture. So this is how I learned about Kulthum, which is the singer that there's a song about in the show, and how beloved and important and cherished she was as an artist in Egypt.
Well, Ari'el, the band plays traditional Arabic music, Egyptian Arabic music, but your character is in love with American music. You keep on asking people if they know Chet Baker.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
because you're a trumpet player.
It's so fun. The trumpet player in the show. But actually, to answer your question, I feel like I straddle all of the questions my identity straddles all the questions that you've asked, which is my father is a Jew of Arab descent. His family immigrated from Yemen to Israel in the 50s. And so I grew up understanding my own Jewish Israeli identity really somewhat as an Arab. Obviously, there are differences between the culture in Yemen and Egypt, but the sounds of the Middle East, the darbuka, the oud, were sounds that I loved growing up, but also that I was ashamed of. So it's fitting that I'm playing a guy who falls in love with American music, because I, as a young man, wanted nothing to do with my culture and wanted more to do with mainstream American music. So I align with Khaled very deeply in that way.
Now, David, you've called Khaled the spiritual underpinning of the show.
Yeah, and in a surprising way, because he's trying to hook up with girls, you know, at the beginning. But then you realize that the character is really about connection, and connection on a deep level. So the character, whether he knows it or not, he really gets the sense that that God means for people to be connected in some way, and he helps it happen. He gives advice to the kid who's afraid of girls, about how not to be afraid of girls. And in that song, which I guess we're going to hear at some point,
right now, in fact.
Okay.
Khaled's Song of Love.
He's giving us, when you listen to it, I feel like he's giving us the type of advice that a Sufi poet like Rumi or Hafiz might be giving us about connection with each other and with something universal.
Okay, so Ari'el Stachel is going to sing Khaled's song about love, and he'll be accompanied by Andrea Grody on piano, Philip Mayer on drums, Alexandra Eckhart on bass, David Garrow Yellen on cello, and Sam Sadigursky on saxophone. And this is one of the many wonderful songs from this show, The Band's Visit.
Ice, you melt the ice, you melt yourself, and soon you're all one puddle. You talk, she talks, it's not about the conversation. The words are like your lips are reaching out to kiss the ear. invisible but really real. Your eyes had eyes, and soon you're looking in a mirror. You realize you can't get nearer. You are both right there. Your skin, her skin, and everything's all right. No edge, no edge, no walls, no border. Two streams of water that become the sea. The dance. You see the wind that moves the trees. The algebra that moves your knees is written in her eyes. Her eyes, your eyes. You're only looking in a mirror. You realize you can't get nearer, and there's nowhere you don't meet.
Ari'el Stachel, who plays Khaled, singing Khaled's song about love from the show The Band's Visit. That's at the Ethel Barrymore Theater at 243 West 47th Street. And if you want to know about ticket information, go to our show page at WNYC.org. We have to go to a break in just a moment, but before we do, I understand a number of members of this production visited Israel after the off-Broadway version.
Yeah, we went in August of this past year.
We sort of went at preparatory to rehearsals for Broadway.
And did it give you insights, help you in preparing for
I wrote a new song in the van in the Negev.
We were driving around in the van. There were instruments lying
You wrote
around.
a song in the Negev?
Yeah.
Lost in the desert?
Yeah, we were just playing music the whole time. Katrina's also plays violin and viola, and Georgia Boot is in our show, multi-instrumentalist, as well as a great comic actor. And we just spent the whole time just playing instruments. And it was a great way to start to psych up for rehearsal. What did it give you as an actor?
I guess just a lot of, you read about things, you listen to things, and you watch things as much as you can from a distance when you're not living there. So to actually be there and stand in that sand and feel the sun and hear the wind and eat the food and meet the people, like it's the actual experience instead of imagining what the experience would be like, and that's really such a gift as an actor to get to have that like actual experience.
We have to go to a break. My guests are Katrina Lenk, who plays Dina in The Band's Visit, currently at the Ethel Barrymore Theater, Tony Shalhoub, who plays Tufig, and Ari'el Stachel, who plays Khaled, and we also have here David Yazbek, who wrote the music and lyrics, and Itamar Moses, who wrote the book. Stay with us for more.
Let me tell you about Petah Tikva. Such a city, everybody loves it. Lots of fun, lots of art, lots of culture. That's Petah Tikva with a P. Where you are, this is not...
Later on in the show, Man Booker Prize winner John Banville discusses his new novel, Mrs. Osmond, his sequel to Henry James's Portrait of a Lady, and then Gary Oldman, who stars as Winston Churchill in Darkest Hour, his co-star, Kristen Scott Thomas, and the film's director, Joe Wright. You're listening to WNYC, WNYC.org. We're also available as a podcast. Moses, the Atlantic Theater Company is such a small space, not much bigger than the space we're in right now.
Yeah.
Were you worried about transferring the show to Broadway and losing that intimate atmosphere?
I mean, yes and no. That was, in a way, that was our chief concern. We sort of adopted an attitude of first do no harm because we felt like it had been pretty successful at the Atlantic. But yeah, there's 199 seats at the Atlantic Theater and there's 1,000 at the Barrymore. So the question was how to let the show fill that space without violating what we had created. And so it was a process. I mean, first of all, it turns out that the footprint of the Barrymore stage is almost identical to the stage at the Atlantic. It's not that much bigger. The big difference is we have wings now, so people can enter from the sides as opposed to everyone having to filter through Upstage Center. But so then it was a question of how do we, gently but effectively throw the show out to a much farther back row, up to a mezzanine. So the set has expanded in some subtle ways. The numbers have expanded, the design. And then it was really just a credit to Cromer, our director, and David Cromer and these actors for figuring out how to, in a very organic way, just fill that space with the show.
You have a rather complicated set with a turntable, and the sets move as we're watching the show, but it all just seems to be perfectly fluid.
Yeah, well, if you'd seen our first preview and then compared it to our final preview, you would see getting it to flow in that way that feels effortless. Also, if you could watch it from backstage, you'd see our stage managers frantically shoving furniture around and throwing props at each other. So.
Now, it's often said that the real key to success in theater and film is casting. Did you know from the start who you wanted for this show?
Well, Tony Shalhoub just felt like the character, and he was in the very, very first reading when there was literally one song.
Yeah.
And it was just like, that spoiled us for anybody else, for that character.
Yeah, which is why we ignored him when he said no to us like 5 times.
Yeah.
On the 6th time, he will say yes. And then Katrina and Ari'el, we found through auditions.
Sometimes people...
How many people did you go through?
How many people did we see at auditions?
Yeah, before you
I don't know.
chose those two.
Because
they seem perfect for the part.
They do. It's impossible to imagine anyone else doing them. I mean, there's very different answers in each case, and maybe I should let them tell those stories. But Katrina, we walked in and it was really it was obvious to us that she sort of fit the role like a glove. With Ari'el, it took us longer to figure it out, but he's definitely the right guy.
I'll speak to I auditioned 7 times.
Wow.
Over 9 months, and this was a role that I knew. I know if I didn't get it, maybe something different would have happened, but I felt like I knew this was my role. And it took them a second to get on board, but also, but I also think though it speaks to sort of the fact, and for any like young actors who might be listening to this, that your craft needs to be improving the whole time. Every single week, from the first audition to the last audition, I was in acting class, getting better, making it more specific. So I think you guys also sort of challenged me to sort of the integrity of the craft.
I do remember actually. Watching your last couple of auditions right before the Atlantic and thinking to myself, this guy's perfect for this. How on earth did we not cast him right away? And that might be, what you're talking about from your perspective is sort of growing into it. But it was really, really obvious to me by the end.
Well, thank you.
Katrina, your song Omar Sharif is just wonderful. It's kind of at the heart of the play. Will you sing it for us?
Okay.
Katrina Lenk, who plays Dina in the band's Visit, and she's accompanied by Andrea Grody on piano, Philip Mayer on drums, Alexandra Eckhart on bass, David Garrow Yellen on cello, and Sam Sadigursky on saxophone. And this is a play that this is a song that kind of talks about cross-cultural understanding. Right? An Israeli woman can be an Omar Sharif fan.
Kulthum and Omar Sharif came floating on the jasmine wind from the west,
from the south, honey in my ears, spice in my mouth, dark and thrilling, strange and sweet, Cleopatra and the handsome thief, and they floated in on a jasmine wind, Kulthum and Omar Sharif, and they floated in on a jasmine wind, Kulthum and Omar Sharif. Friday evening, Omar Sharif, in black and white and blurry through tears. My mother and I would sit there in a trance. He was cool to the marrow, the pharaoh of romance. Sunday morning, Kulthum, her voice would fill our living room. The ship from Egypt always came sailing in on radio waves, and the jasmine wind deep perfume, and the living room becomes a garden, and the TV set becomes a fountain, and the music flows in the garden, and everything grows. Kulthum and Omar Sharif came floating on a lemon leaf, flying in on a jasmine wind, Kulthum and Omar Sharif, and we danced with them in a jasmine scented wind. Kulthum and Omar Sharif.
Katrina Lenk singing Omar Sharif, one of the songs from the hit musical, The Band's Visit, currently at the Itamar Theater at 243 West 47th Street. Also with us are Tony Shalhoub and Ari'el Stachel, and David Yazbek, who wrote the music and lyrics, and Itamar Moses, who wrote the book, and a bunch of musicians from the band as well. This is WNYC, WNYC.org. I'm Leonard Lopate. Now, there was another name there in that song other than Omar Sharif.
Kulthum.
And who is Kulthum?
She was a beloved singer in Egyptian music from like the 50s to the 70s, I want to say.
She was the most famous singer in the world,
She
even
would-
more than Sinatra.
Yeah.
Imagine like Ella Fitzgerald and Sinatra all rolled
Elvis.
rolled into one in terms, not just in Egypt, but all over the Middle East, really. Gigantic, and not just a singer, but she was an actress too. She starred in Egyptian movies and in her, I think mostly in her younger days, but she was a phenomenon and
And a master musician and still a legend.
And the point is, of course, again, cross-cultural Israelis can appreciate musicians from Egypt, and one of the greatest actors of his time, also an Egyptian. Did the songs help you understand your character?
Oh, yes. Yeah, they're, you mentioned earlier that the songs are a little bit different and they don't, quote unquote, move the plot along, but I would say definitely everyone is different at the end of the song from how they are at the beginning. So like maybe physical plot, not as much pushed forward, maybe, but there's like a huge emotional arc that is gone through in each song, and there's like changes are happening during each song.
Isn't this the second time in 7 months that you're originating a role on Broadway?
Yes.
You played You played both roles in the initial off-Broadway runs of these two plays. Indecent. So you went from this to Indecent and then back to this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, she
Very
went from,
lucky.
she
But you
went
got
from
to play an
Indecent
instrument.
to the band's visit, back to Indecent, back to the band's
That's
visit.
right. That's right.
That was done off Broadway.
You ever
as
get
well.
confused?
No.
You played viola in Indecent,
Yes. Yeah.
but you don't play an instrument in this one? 'cause
No,
your
I just
character
get to
doesn't?
sit and enjoy these brilliant musicians playing.
Katrina has many, many, many talents, and our director joked a couple of weeks ago that if someone collapsed in the theater and she said, "Everyone step back, I'm a doctor," we would believe her.
Well,
True.
I'm asking you, in fact, all of you, is it more fun to originate a role or to just to find a role, in fact, that somebody else did and make it your own?
It's just fun to have a job.
True.
You know, it doesn't. Yeah, there are kind of advantages and problems with both. Really, I mean, originating a role is incredibly challenging, but recreating a role is you know, it's fun too. It's just
Well, in this case, you can invent the character. Later, you have to kind of make it your own after somebody else's.
Well, the big difference is that when you're originating original musical, you're usually working with living authors who can bend and and it's a real collaboration. So when it says in a playbill, Tony Shalhoub created the role of Tawfiq, it's really accurate.
But I owe a tribute to a debt to the man who originated this role in the film, because this we're just working off of that template, and I had seen the film actually weirdly before I knew anything about this. I saw it when it first came out 10 years ago.
Did you ever see something like that and think, "Gee, that would be something good for me"?
Well, it didn't really occur to me because it was a film, and I just figured, well, that's done, and I missed that one.
What if it was like a sitcom? What if we turned it into a sitcom? Would that be something you'd be interested in?
Yeah, it crossed my mind. It crossed my mind. No, but we had to, even though there was that template, we had to take it and kind of try to make it our own. And
When was the last time you were in a musical?
let me think. That would be never.
Really?
All right.
No, actually, I may have done, a million years ago. I don't remember. Maybe not on a real professional level, but.
But you do get to sing.
I went kicking and screaming into this, I'll be honest with you.
I did a lot of the dragging, I'd like to say.
Well, part of the problem, I'm sure, for actors here is getting the accents right. Tony, you mentioned that you grew up in a Lebanese family, a different accent.
Well, we all
But you also do Wisconsin. You do a whole bunch of things.
Yeah, we also had really good dialect coaches on this. Two different people, one for the Hebrew and the Israeli accent, and then another woman for the Egyptian and accent and the Arabic. And we all worked very hard from the very first day of rehearsal, and so they were invaluable to us.
Katrina, you've been in a bunch of other Broadway productions, The Miracle Worker, Spider-Man, Once, where you also played the fiddle as Reza. How much do you play music on your own?
I don't get to very much at the moment, but I do write, and I have my own little music project that I do when, say, things are a little quiet. Keeps the old juices flowing, I guess.
Is it true that the first role you were cast in professionally was Sally Bowles in Cabaret?
No.
Oh.
The first role I was cast in professionally
You
was
can't trust the internet.
a busker in My Fair Lady. I had to do a cartwheel. Yeah.
And you
They
did
paid
it
me.
every night?
Yes.
While saving lives as a doctor.
But then my first actual leading role, was Sally Bowles at Pheasant Run Dinner Theater.
Tony, would you say that?
Theater, did you say?
Would you say your character Tawfiq and Dina are more alike or more different?
Well, I think on the surface they seem really, really different, but they both have, some kind of baggage and carnage behind them in their lives, and I think my character is a little bit locked down. He's a little bit shut down, and her character really draws him out. And but she has things in her past that have created some sort of sense of paralysis in her life too. And somehow, when these two people meet and start to share their stories and their lives, they crack open in a way that probably wouldn't or couldn't have happened had they not met.
David, you put together a whole bunch of wonderful musicians here. Is there any jamming after the show?
Well, there's jamming all the time. And to be honest, I vetted the musicians, but our contractor, Dean Sharon, now put together this incredible group of musicians. There's always music going on, and we actually sometimes have little jam sessions after the show sometimes with guests who are at the theater that we record and put online sometimes. But everyone's playing all the time.
It's been so great talking with all of you. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having us.
Leonard.
And thanks to all the musicians who accompanied our two wonderful singers. You've been listening to Katrina Lenk, Ari'el Stachel, who both performed for us, Tony Shalhoub, I guess we could say the star, the big name in this. But although it's very much an ensemble,
supporting these.
It's
two.
an ensemble
It is.
production. And to David Yazbek, who wrote the music and lyrics, and Itamar Moses, who wrote the book for the band's visit, which is currently at the Ethel Barrymore Theater at 243 West 47th Street. Ticket information's on our show page at WNYC.org. I know actors tell me they never read their reviews, but I can tell you they've been great. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
That sparks on the off. Igniting with a minor 9.